Have you ever wondered how much we have lost? Like, how much our species is left behind in history and forgotten? Languages, cultures, traditions that were abandoned or wiped out from memory, once vibrant and rich but long since faded from the pages of history. In our current, fast-paced world, the news cycle often reminds me of how quickly we forget. Stories mentioned briefly and then vanished, barely leaving a trace. I bet every one of you watching has either completely forgotten or never knew about the suicide bombing in downtown Nashville Christmas morning 2020.
Our top story tonight, that enormous explosion that rocked the city of Nashville this morning. The Associated Press now reporting human remains have been found near the blast site. Tonight, investigators believe the blast was deliberate.
An RV containing a massive bomb, the design of which remains classified by the FBI. So powerful that when it detonated, it damaged some 60 buildings and collapsed several of them. Nashville still hasn't repaired the damage, even now, 4 years later. You can go on maps and see the damage yourself if you don't believe me. This was not a small explosion, nor was it non-fatal. Yet, within a week, this had disappeared from headlines on the public eye. Why? Now, despite the damage done by this gigantic explosion, only one fatality was reported, the bomber himself. How was such a large bomb so ineffective in a downtown area, I hear you ask? Well, that's because the bomber played loud messages warning anyone nearby to evacuate immediately. And they listened.
You can hear this message. Evacuate now. If you can hear this message, evacuate now.
Now you think that this would be a giant story. How did this guy build such a device? Also, this incident revealed a critical flaw in our communications infrastructure. An AT&T switching station was damaged in the explosion, and this caused multiple counties across Tennessee to lose internet, phone, and even 911 services. This was such a seemingly big deal and had an obviously large impact, so why did we all forget or never hear about this incident? What have we learned from it? Who is this man and why did he off himself in such a striking way? Why hasn't the city repaired the damage yet, 4 years later? How did one bomb take out the internet and phones across such a wide area? And was that a coincidence or the intended outcome? What did his family and friends say about him? Did they see this coming? Okay, so if you're not familiar with Iceberg videos, it's where someone makes a list of information divided into tiers, the top being the most well-known info and the bottom being the most unknown. That's how I've decided is the most impactful way to lay out all of the info I've gathered on this topic, so here we go. Surface level. Timeline. 1:22 a.m. Christmas morning, December 25th, 2020. A white RV arrives at 166 2nd Avenue North, downtown Nashville. The RV remained parked there in silence until 4:30 a.m. 2nd Avenue building owner and resident Betsy Williams said she woke up after hearing the sound of several bursts of gunfire. 5:32 a.m. After another round of gunfire, Williams' wife calls 911.
RHEA. We're hearing gunshots on the street.
How many shots did you hear?
We've heard it happen 3 times now, and each time it sounds like it's 6 or 7 shots.
Officers Tyler Llewellyn and Brianna Hosey of the MNPD arrive to investigate. They spot an RV parked on 2nd Avenue near Commerce Street. Then they observe a female voice repeating warning messages broadcasted from a PA system mounted on the RV.
911. There's a recording out there that's saying there's a limited time to evacuate this area. There's a large bomb inside this vehicle.
Let me check and see what we
Can you
got.
please send the police up here?
We do have officers out there.
Right, are they reporting anything about this recording that we're hearing?
We got like a call about shots being heard.
Yeah, shots, but now there's a sound on there that says there's a limited time to evacuate this area. There's a large bomb inside this vehicle that is playing over and over and over outside.
Responding officers notify the local bomb squad and begin to evacuate all surrounding buildings. 6:15 a.m., a 15-minute countdown begins playing from the PA system, alerting residents to leave the area because of an impending explosion. In the final 3 minutes of the countdown, speakers on the RV play the wistful 1964 song Downtown by Petula Clark. 6:28 a.m., the bomb explodes.
Oh my God.
What is the address of your emergency?
Oh my God, my entire building just fell down and it's collapsing. Please come.
6:45 a.m., police begin to block downtown streets as federal agents are called in to assist in immediate investigation. It wasn't until 8 a.m. when the police would release a statement saying that the incident is linked to an RV that was parked on the side of the road. At 9 a.m., the police finally say the bombing was an intentional act, as opposed to a suspected gas leak or other incidental detonation. By 11 a.m., several people had been taken to the police department's central precinct for questioning. but authorities declined to give any details. 12:30 p.m., mobile phone and internet services down in multiple Middle Tennessee counties. AT&T regional telecommunications hub on 2nd Avenue was directly next to where the RV exploded. The outage leads to widespread 911 issues in the Nashville area and telecommunications issues at Nashville International Airport, halting outbound flights. Around midday, an ex-girlfriend of the bomber wakes up and sees the news. She now lives in another country. The woman immediately thinks of Tony, her ex. She strongly believes he was involved. She is distraught for hours, unable to speak clearly, as she suffers from a weak resolve as the result of mental illness. When she sees that the FBI is handling the investigation asking for tips, she collects herself and calls to tell them that she knows who did this. Now's a good time to tell you that not everything about this is clear-cut, black and white. Not all of these details are what they seem or even add up. You see, there's a lot of things about this that I found that don't make sense or are interesting, or at least don't seem to make sense. This is just the surface, the tip of the iceberg. Subsurface, Tony Warner.
In my gut, I knew it was him.
This is Pam Perry, a Tennessee woman aged 63. She's the ex-girlfriend of our bomber, Anthony Quinn Warner, known to his friends as Tony. Tony lived in Antioch, a suburb of Nashville, for his entire life, from what I can tell. He joined the military out of high school. According to his lawyer, he often spoke of his military service. He then worked for a mom-and-pop alarm company for a long time called Ace Alarms, installing intrusion alarms as their sole technician. His apprentice there for some time was Tom Lundborg, the grandson of the Ace Alarms owner and founder. Eventually, he left and started his own company from 93 to 98 called Custom Alarms, even stealing some of the clientele from his old company. According to Tom Lundborg, his new company failed because he didn't have the personality to deal with customers. Tom also had some other interesting things to say about Tony's personality. He said that Tony told him he hated all cops and they're all corrupt. He told him, never trust a cop. He said that Tony was a long-haired hippie, a real smart, cocky guy who loved smoking weed and shit-talking the government. Tom also said that Tony spoke about his military service in the Navy. Authorities say that Tony planned to commit suicide. All evidence so far suggests that he was gearing up to do so. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, he quit his job and gave away his car and even his house. When a neighbor asked him if he had any big plans for Christmas, he responded, "Oh yeah, Nashville and the world is never going to forget me." Tony's neighbors also said that this bombing was out of character for him, but that he was a very secluded and isolated man that they didn't know all that well. He kept to himself. His RV was located in his backyard behind a wooden privacy fence. A late 80s model Ford Four Winds Chateau class RV. He was apparently rigging to explode for almost 2 years. Tony got into IT work. He built up his background and eventually retired to become a part-time contract worker for small businesses around the area. He'd come in and set up new computers or fix issues with networks, things like that. Basically a contract IT guy. Now, I can't seem to find much on this guy for the last 20 years of his life. He wasn't online, he didn't switch jobs, no info is available anywhere. And apparently the FBI couldn't find anything on him either. How do I know this? Well, because Pam Perry, 16 months before the bombing, had a mental breakdown, begging someone, anyone, to listen to her about her boyfriend who was building bombs in his RV.
The depth. The plot thickens.
I won't have hundreds, possibly thousands of lives on my soul. And I will shoot him in the leg if I have to. God, don't make me shoot somebody. I'm going to call him and I'm going to get him over here and I'm going to record because I don't have proof, but I know what he's doing. And I'm afraid for my life and everybody else's.
In August of 2019, Pam Perry placed a call to her lawyer, Raymond Throckmorton III. She made concerning comments about committing suicide if no one would listen to her, and she said that she needed law enforcement to arrest Tony Warner. She was in a state of mental distress as a result of being harassed and threatened by Tony. She told her lawyer that he was stalking her, spying on her, and breaking into her house at night. She said that Tony was drugging and poisoning her. The lawyer said there's no way to tell how much of this is true, but she was obviously distraught. Ray then called the police and asked them to meet him at her house and speak to her.
Petula Clark, and she has made a number of threats about her own life. She is armed. She has firearms. She is supposedly with the firearms on the front porch. I need a police officer to meet me over there. She has also given me information about another resident of that part of Nashville who is I think also got some mental and emotional problems, who is allegedly building bombs in his house on Bakertown Road. And I have reason to believe that there might actually be more truth to what she's telling me about him than what she's telling me about herself.
He made mention to the police himself of her reports that Tony was building bombs in his RV. When the police arrived at Pam's house, they found 2 unloaded firearms on the porch sitting next to her, which she handed over to them, stating that she didn't want any weapons around her boyfriend anymore. She thought he was dangerous. She went on to tell police about Tony's RV bomb building, and they promised to look into this if Pam would agree to go to a hospital for psychiatric treatment. The lawyer told officers that, quote, Tony Warner frequently talks about the military and bomb making. He knows what he's doing and he is capable of making a bomb. Throckmorton said he urged Metro Police to look into Pam's claim. Now, the police made good on their promise to follow up, but didn't do so very well. They went to Tony's house and put eyes on the RV, but weren't able to gain access to the backyard without a search warrant, and got no answer when knocking on the door. Obviously. There was an officer stationed outside the house for a short time, and they repeated attempts to knock on the door, but never made contact with Mr. Warner, or saw any evidence that he was home at all. They then sent the complaint to the FBI, who checked into Tony's records, but were unable to find anything of concern in his past other than a marijuana possession in the 70s. Mostly due to the fact that his online presence was entirely missing. If he was online at all, it was anonymously, which could be right up his alley as an IT professional. The FBI cleared Tony and the local police filed away the complaint without any further investigation at all. Police claimed that they reached out to Raymond, his attorney, but Ray told them they would need a warrant. And that makes sense, but he's not blocking law enforcement here. In a later interview, he said that they had enough probable cause to obtain a warrant from a judge, and he was simply urging them to do so. Later, after the bombing, City Council would put together a committee and determine why the police failed to stop this with the complaints that they had over a year beforehand. They found that proper procedure was in fact followed. This whole police interaction is quite something, but has an entirely different tone when you take into account that the local police and FBI stated that Tony was not on their radar. How can he not be on anyone's radar when the ex-girlfriend begged the police to do something about Tony and his RV bomb? As I mentioned, the RV was parked outside of an AT&T substation. Damage caused multiple counties across Tennessee and neighboring states to lose internet, phone, and subsequently unable to reach 911 and emergency services for days on end. Turns out, Tony had previously worked for AT&T for a time, like his father, Charles Bernard Warner, who worked for Southwestern Bell and AT&T before him. Pam said that she, quote, knew he harbored some animosity toward AT&T for some bizarre reason. He worked there, was familiar with the building, and knew what they did there. Could Tony have anticipated the widespread communications infrastructure damage that he would cause? Was this part of his plan? That brings up another good question. Why is the damage still not repaired? Windows still boarded up, buildings still blocked off, structures still in ruins. I read an article that stated the city had put together a committee to decide how to plan the rebuild, but how has that taken 4 years? Apparently most of the affected buildings downtown were old historic brick structures, and they were easy pickings for Tony's Christmas boom. They have now outlined a plan for a rebuild that would honor the historical background and hopefully revive the decimated area. News outlets also relentlessly reported that Tony was suffering from 5G paranoia, which may have been the motive behind the destruction of the AT&T building. And I'm not joking when I say news outlets relentlessly reported this. This was just blown up everywhere. Every single news outlet that mentioned Tony Warner says something about 5G paranoia. And there is zero evidence of this anywhere at all. His letters never mentioned 5G. His emails, his ex-girlfriend and the neighbors said that he never talked about 5G. The FBI official report and police reports make no mention of 5G paranoia. Somewhere along the line, somebody probably suggested that he held 5G conspiracy belief due to some conspiratorial letters that the news picked up, and the news just ran with it without any evidence. Other news outlets probably saw that and ran with that story as well, citing that news article originally as a secondary source of information. It doesn't make any sense. It was a news echo chamber. Everybody said it was 5G paranoia. It had nothing to do with that. The void, the conspiracy. Now that leads perfectly into the next layer, Tony's letters. In the last few days of his life, Tony sent out an undisclosed number of packages to friends across the country. They arrived in manila envelopes with no return address. They contain a cover page, a letter, and 2 thumb drives. Very few details have been released about these packages, and when asked about them, the FBI only replied with some robotic message.
We're aware that the suspect sent materials which espoused his viewpoints to several acquaintances throughout the country. We're asking that those who receive these contact the FBI at 800-CALL-FBI.
The FBI never told anyone what was in these packages or how many there were. A local news outlet was contacted by an unnamed friend of Tony's who did receive a package. He gave the news outlet the letters. The cover page wrote, "Hey dude, you'll never believe what I found in the park. The knowledge I have gained is immeasurable. I now understand everything, and I mean everything, from who and what we are to what the known universe really is. You should watch videos A0 through A-blah. The folders that have stuff to look at all have dash folder at the end of the name. Enjoy the videos. Woof woof Julio. Now there's a lot to unpack here. First, how do we know this letter came from Anthony Warner? There's no return address, there's no name anywhere, the letter is signed off Julio, and that's obviously not his name. Well, his friend told a local news outlet that he quite often signed letters and emails off with Woof Woof Julio. Warner, turns out, owned a dog named Julio. Was he writing correspondence from his dog's POV? Now, notably, Tony was known by his friends to spend time in the nearby Montgomery Bell State Park hunting aliens. The contents of the rest of this letter are only teased by news outlets. They stated that they would not be releasing the entirety of the letter, but did mention a few chosen phrases from Tony's writings. Quote, "The moon landing and 9/11 have so many anomalies in them that they are hard to count. September 2001 was supposed to be the end game for the planet." He says that this is when aliens and UFOs began launching attacks on the Earth, which is consistently covered up by the media. He then starts to talk about reptilians that he believed could tweak human DNA. They put a switch into the human brain so that they could walk among us and appear as human. He also said that everything is an illusion and there is no such thing as death. What was on the thumb drives? Why was he signing off as Julio? What the hell did he find in the park? I'm so curious to know whether his thoughts were genuinely laid out in a cohesive manner or if he rambled like a madman. Do you think his letters were actually coherent and provided any evidence of something unusual? I mean, he spells correctly, he was an intelligent guy. From the limited evidence we have of his writings in these letters, it seems like he's speaking normally. I wish we knew what was on there. Remember how I said Tony gave away his house before he died? Well, the lucky winner of the free $250,000 property was 29-year-old Michelle Lisa Swing, who lived in LA. Who the fuck is that, I hear you ask? Well, I don't have any clue, because when Lisa was asked how she knew Tony, she declined to comment. Get this, she also denied all knowledge of receiving the deed to the property. She said to a journalist, "In the state of Tennessee, you can deed property to someone else without their consent or their signature or anything. I didn't even buy the house, he just deeded it over to me without my knowledge. So this is all very weird to me. That's about all I can say." Okay, well here's what doesn't add up. She claims not to have any knowledge about the house, yet handed over a letter to the FBI that he sent her about the house. The letter read, "The attic has plywood and lighting. Take a look. The basement is not normal. Take a look. Woof woof, Julio." How did she not know about the deed when she possessed a letter about said house? By the way, the ATF searched the house, and the only things they found noteworthy were a $1,000 check, $100 cash, a computer, a thumb drive, and power tools. They didn't release any other info. What's in the basement that's not normal? She told news reporters that he said in that same letter he intended to travel on Christmas Eve to spend a few weeks in the woods with his dogs. Now, this wasn't the first house she had been given for free by Tony. You see, Tony's brother passed away about a year earlier. At that time, Tony inherited ownership to the deceased's home, a $160,000 house that was located 12 miles from downtown. He transferred ownership of this home to Lisa Swing back in January of 2019. When Tony's mother found out about this, she sued Tony. The court ruled in favor of Tony, saying that he had the right to give the house to whoever he wanted. Lisa quietly transferred ownership of the house back to Tony's mother without any complaint. How does Lisa know Tony? Why was he transferring almost $500,000 in property to her? This is probably not a romantic relationship. Lisa was 29 at the time, Tony was 63. Ray Throckmorton, the lawyer, if you remember, said that Lisa was a child of a friend. And in another interview, he told the reporter that Tony was friends with Lisa's mother a long time ago. Was this his illegitimate daughter? The ages are right, but she declines to comment on any of this, so we'll likely never know who she was to Tony. We can only speculate. If you ask me my opinion, I think it's a good chance that she could be a long-lost daughter of his. Just judging off of what I've learned about Tony in this research, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would just pick a girl up at Hooters or something and then just try and sugar daddy her and give her houses. Also, Lisa was not the kind of girl who would work at Hooters. She's a management executive at an entertainment firm for a record label. She makes a lot of money. She went to college. It just doesn't add up. Now let's talk about the messages that Tony played from the RV warning to evacuate the area. I believe he wanted to maximize damage but minimize human casualties. When officers arrived in response to the 911 calls about the gunshots, the loudspeaker said, your primary objective is to evacuate these buildings. Almost like Tony was instructing the officers on what to do when they showed up. Dashcam footage of responding officers show that the message changed as they were walking by. You can imagine Tony peeking through the blinds and changing the messages to warn police if they come too close.
That's so weird. That's like something out of a movie.
Like The Purge?
Yeah.
Keep watching that.
Now he had a well-formulated plan. The gunshots to call in the police, then the messages to tell them to clear the area. It's unclear whether he shot a gun or played gunshots over his loudspeaker. They did find spent ammunition in the aftermath, but investigators said that they couldn't determine whether those were spent intentionally through a gun or if they went off due to the bomb. There's also no way to tell if these came from the RV. Also, approximately 3 minutes before the detonation, Tony played Downtown by Petula Clark, a 60s pop song. Pam, his ex, said that she recognized the song because he used to play it for her. Why this song? The FBI won't obviously release the type or design of the bomb that Tony used to create such a large explosion. That's not the kind of thing that they tell the general public about. Pam says that he was stocking up on readily available materials and often talked about how easy it was to create a bomb of such size.
He was telling me he knew when he was going to die, that he was stocking up bomb material. He was cooking this stuff.
I did find an interview with the longtime FBI explosives expert, Dave Williams, a guy who conducted investigations on scene for the World Trade Center, Oklahoma City bombings, Pan Am 103, and the Unabomber bombings. He gives extensive evidence to support his theory that Tony's RV bomb was, what he says, a propane-based fuel-air mixture. Here's why. The initial explosion had an extremely bright fireball that burned evenly at the ignition point and rapidly dissipates without much smoke or vaporization. Within roughly 4 seconds, the fireball has already been consumed. At about 20 seconds post-explosion, the area is mostly calm again. He says, quote, "My overwhelming opinion based on the video is that a fuel-based explosive was used instead of other compounds like TNT, black powder, or ammonium nitrate." And he says you can rule out kerosene or gas because of the lack of dark soot and smoke clouds. He also says that if a hydrocarbon had been used, we would have seen bits of flaming liquid fuel scattered about the scene and causing a series of small fires. Instead, the video suggests the bombing involved a propane-based explosive. Now, propane has a low boiling point, causing it to vaporize when released from a pressurized container. When ignited, a propane gas can produce extreme heat to the tune of 2,000 to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. In the Nashville bombing video, the color of the fireball ranges from bright orange to white, indicating the temperature at the point of ignition was indeed somewhere in the ballpark of 2,000 to 3,000 Fahrenheit. Like kerosene, propane burns extremely quickly. However, it burns far more cleanly, which is why propane is the preferred fuel for outdoor grills and other home applications. This accounts for the rapid and clean post-ignition burn-off we see in the Nashville explosion. Even further indications that a propane bomb was used can be found by examining the photos of the scene after the blast. Now, remember how we talked about Tony's military service? His girlfriend, his lawyer, his old apprentice at Ace Alarms, all said that Tony spoke of his military service in the Navy. Well, turns out that police records, FBI, and the Department of Defense claim to have no military records for Anthony Quinn Warner. In an interview, Dr. Errol Southers, Homeland Security and Counterterrorism expert, stated that Anthony Warner held explosives permits from 1993 to 1998. In order to have been granted a permit like this, you have to justify the reason why you need a permit. You have to justify to the permit granting body why you actually need it. Anthony was granted a 5-year permit, so he obviously had an adequate reason to handle explosives. Surely it wasn't his alarm installation job. What reason could he have to handle explosives? Is it military related? I mean, the FBI and the police said that Tony wasn't on their radar, and that obviously wasn't true. Here's a couple of throwaway facts that I couldn't really find anywhere to fit. Police believe that Tony had his dog Julio with him while inside the RV when it detonated. Conspiracy freaks online think that RV was hit with a missile because of some QAnon shit. There was another conspiracy about the AT&T building being tied to the election because AT&T was supposedly contracted to audit the functionality of some Dominion voting machines following the election. This was proven false, And I wish I had that hour of my life back tracking that down. The claim was entirely unsubstantiated and unfounded. Another interesting point made by Redditors was that there was apparently some explosive and flammable materials being stored nearby in some of the buildings that were affected, based on some Google Maps screenshots. This may have helped contribute to the magnitude of the damage. Also, when phone and internet went down, it was actually due in part to the subfloors of the building filling up with water from pipelines and flooding out the electrical equipment. Last thing, initially the way in which they identified Anthony was the bomber was from the VIN number on the RV, which they somehow found in the wreckage. They then found human remains on the scene, used a hat found in his old car, and matched his DNA to those remains. So why did this disappear from the news so quickly? Let me summarize with 3 little points that I think are adequate explanations. First, the only life that was lost was the driver of the RV, the man who locked himself inside and detonated the bomb. The news didn't seem to care all that much about only one life lost. Second, this was only 11 days before the January 6th riot at the Capitol, which overshadowed basically everything in the news. The media couldn't link this to a polarizing political ideology that would indicate domestic terrorism. This was December 2020. The George Floyd protests and riots were all summer long. The election was only 1 month prior, where Trump lost and claimed it was fraud. COVID lockdowns were in full swing. The public searched frantically for a motive that came out of one of these places, but there was no available evidence to support that any of that had any bearing on the bomber's motive. Motive is elusive here. But if you ask my opinion, I'm going to ignore the conspiracy and go down the most obvious path. Tony wanted to die, and he wanted it to be spectacular. He was a lonely man. His only long-term girlfriend that I could find passed away in 2017. He had no relationship at all with his estranged possible daughter. His relationship with his mother was on the rocks, and she had sued him a year earlier. His brother died in 2018, and I'm sure that the pandemic had solidified his isolation. He was retired, wasn't very social. The companies that he was contracted out to said that he only worked maybe 1 day a month. So he didn't really get very much human interaction that we can tell. Tony Warner told his ex-girlfriend and his neighbor that he had cancer, and that's why he was giving everything away. Maybe he did have cancer, but I think he had a more figurative cancer of the mind for sure. He receded into a conspiratorial state of paranoia. In the end, there was so much that we will never know about Tony or why he did this. I, for one, would love to see the videos on the thumb drive, or speak to Lisa, get the truth about Tony, or ask Pam about her relationship with him and what he was like, or see what he was talking about with the basement not being normal. But the FBI is never going to share any of that info with us, and it's not ideal to torture the people close to him with tone-deaf questions about him. Listen, thanks for going down this rabbit hole with me, friends. I'm probably not gonna get into the habit of making Iceberg videos. I think they're a little overdone, but I will continue to make video essays in general because I thoroughly enjoy doing so. Special thanks to Hunter P. and Brick Walls for the feedback, and to John Parjan for making the TikTok that brought this event to my attention.